Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Coach Cody podcast. It's another week gone by, another week of triple digit heat here in California. And let me tell you, it has been rough. I know we talk about seasonal depression, but I feel like there's also a moment of depression in the summer when it's so fucking hot that you basically just isolate yourself in your house like you would in the winter because it's cold. But instead now it's too hot. But I'd actually prefer the cold, but I also live in California, so, maybe I wouldn't if I lived somewhere where it was much, much colder. But the heat is definitely not fun. You just basically sweat all the time. And here in California, when it's triple digit, we like to, make ourselves feel better by saying, but it's a dry heat. But I don't even, sure, we don't have humidity, but just bring on all the dry skin and nosebleeds and all that stuff. It's also fun times. But anyways, send thoughts and prayers that California survives this heat wave. We've had instances where internet has randomly gone out, I think, due to the heat. So yeah, fun times over here. Hopefully the internet stays on while I'm doing this podcast. But anyways, speaking of heat and seasonal depression or seasonal whatever, I'm a stress ball. If you've been listening for any length of time, you know that I struggle with anxiety. I have for as long as I can remember. So I'm always looking for things to help, whether that's a supplement, medication, therapy, different modalities of therapy. But today I wanted to look at a study about ashwagandha. You may have heard of it, you may have not. It gets thrown around a lot, for the purpose of it helping with stress and anxiety. But I wanted to look at what the research says. So I'm going to dive into that. So, all right. So in this study, what was studied? The effect of supplementing with ashwagandha on anxiety and perceived stress in people with mild to moderate stress and anxiety. So the primary outcome was perceived stress, assessed using the perceived stress scale. The secondary outcomes were anxiety and quality of life, assessed using questionnaires. Salivary cortisol, urinary levels of serotonin and dopamine, and serum levels of glutathione. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And oh Lord, don't I sound smart? We're just gonna go with that M word that's long. All right, so who was studied? 50 participants, ages 21 to 54, 78% men, 22% women from India, who were without apparent health conditions but had mild to moderate stress and anxiety. So how was it studied? So in this 60-day randomized controlled trial, the participants were assigned to take a daily dose of either placebo or 500 milligrams of ashwagandha, standardized to contain 2.5% withanolides, i.e. plant compounds thought to mainly be responsible for ashwagandha's potential benefits, plus 5 milligrams of piperine. So stress and anxiety levels were assessed at baseline, day 30 and day 60, the end of the study. At baseline and at the end of the study, quality of life was assessed. Fasted blood samples were collected, random urine samples were taken and analyzed within 24 hours, and saliva samples were taken in the morning at 8 a.m. and late afternoon, 4 p.m. So what were the results? Compared to baseline and the placebo group, stress and anxiety levels decreased and quality of life improved in the ashwagandha group. So regarding biomarkers compared to baseline and placebo group, the morning cortisol level decreased and the urinary serotonin level increased in the ashwagandha group. So hey, it looks like ashwagandha actually might have some legit helpfulness when it comes to stress and anxiety. But there are some things that you need to know. So within this study, the reductions in both stress and anxiety with ashwagandha appear to have been clinically important, meaning the effects should be large enough to produce a noticeable improvement in symptoms. All right, so it's time to go out and buy some ashwagandha. But what you do want to point out, or I do want to point out, so the participants had mild to moderate stress and anxiety, but were not specifically diagnosed with a mental health condition. So as a result, the results may not be generalizable to people with clinical conditions such as generalized anxiety disorder our social anxiety, all the anxieties, That being said, it sounds like it's worth checking out. The only other thing I would say is this was tested in people who had mild to moderate stress and anxiety. So there's also different levels of severity of anxiety. If you're someone who is a stress cadet like me, it might not be as helpful. Maybe it will help take the edge off a little bit, but it's probably not going to be a replacement for, medications or therapy or et cetera, et cetera. So proceed with caution and just know it's not going to be something that's going to be a magic pill or a miracle supplement. But hey, sounds like it might actually work. So anyways, now that we know that ashwagandha does have some benefits for stress and anxiety, it might be worth taking if you're dealing with a setback. So today I want to talk about setbacks in your fitness journey, because it's one of those things that you just kind of have to accept that is going to happen at some point. There's no perfect journey. You just have to be like, okay, at some point, life's going to throw hurdles at me, and I'm going to have to figure out how to pivot. And that's the biggest thing you got to remember. It's always better to pivot versus quit. It's just part of life. We can't control what life throws at us. So it's always best to be prepared. We don't know what life is going to throw at us, but we just should know and accept that at some point it's going to throw something. All right. So what exactly defines a setback? So setbacks are obstacles that basically test your commitment to your goal. And there can be two types of setbacks, I feel like. So there's mental setbacks and then there's physical. So like an injury, a surgery, or something along those lines. And personally, I've had a lot of setbacks in my fitness journey. Lots of surgeries, knee surgeries. Also, I'm trans, so I had phalloplasty, and that was a good 2 years of in and out of surgery. Lots of setbacks. I feel like I would have a surgery, I would recover, get back in the gym, and right when I recovered and maybe gained some strength back, I'd end up having to have another surgery. So that was fun, but it did teach me resilience. It taught me how to pivot, and it taught me how to deal with setbacks, better in the future. And I wanted to go over some of the things I've learned even through my setbacks that might be helpful for you. Because like I said, at some point we're all going to deal with a setback. Hopefully it doesn't have to be, an injury and surgery and all that, but chances are, we're all going to have to deal with an injury at some point. So when it comes to physical setbacks, like surgery, especially if you're a trans person, you're transitioning, those can be a little bit easier, not always, to deal with, because you can almost plan for it. And I'll kind of give you some tips of how you can plan for it. But when it comes to mental setbacks, and if you're someone who struggles with anxiety and depression, sometimes you never know, what's coming for you. And sometimes you don't ever know how you're going to react to it, specifically with depression. And depression looks different in everybody. Some people might have depression, but you are more active and you still hit your workouts, and maybe even more so. Maybe you go harder when you're depressed and you're high functioning because that's just how you handle depression. Or maybe you're someone who handles depression in a way that it's really hard to get out of bed in the morning, and you're just life is hard. You don't even brushing your teeth is hard, showering is hard. So just know that depression takes different forms in different people. And there's no right or wrong way to be depressed, if anyone needs to know that. So there could be some people who are functioning, they look completely like they got their shit together, but clinically they're depressed. So anyways, how to deal with the mental setbacks. So that can be, like I said, how people handle depression and stuff differently. But sometimes you might just have to bring down the bar a little bit. So if you're really struggling with motivation, trying to do as much as you can, even you might have to take down the expectation a bit, take the goals down a bit. Maybe you're having a hard time getting to the gym, so you're only working out 3 times a week instead of what you want to work out at 5. Sometimes it's okay, and you can just have to reduce the number of workouts you're doing per per week. Like, meet yourself where you're at, right? Don't try to continue to force yourself to just do more and more and more. Sometimes you need to dial it back in order to take some steps forward, because you don't want to quit just completely. And when it comes to the mental side of things also, and this, goes into the physical side of things as well, but therapy, medications, all that stuff is something to look into if you're dealing with a mental setback. And sometimes physical setbacks can turn into mental setbacks. So, it's all kind of complicated, but both of them are equally as stressful to deal with. But so let's just kind of put it into the realm of, let's say you're having surgery and it's a month away. How do you prepare for that? Well, just know that once you get to the surgery, and say you can't work out for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, prepare for it to have an emotional impact on you. You can end up depressed, because post-op depression is real, and therefore you're kind of dealing with two hurdles, right? And navigating that is going to be, you're going to need some support, right? Therapists, friends, coaches, whatever. But let's talk about just acknowledging the emotional impact that an injury or surgery can have. It's going to be hard because it's going to throw you out of your routine. And there might be times where you're thinking, wow, like, how am I going to come back from this? Or I've lost so much progress. How am I going to get that progress back and then keep moving forward? It's really discouraging, right? Because it's like you feel like you're taking such a huge step back, and then you're feeling like you're going to have to start all over again. But I will tell you, you're not actually starting all over again. There's a little thing called muscle memory, and it does tend to come back the second time around. After I had phalloplasty, I lost a shit ton of muscle, like a shit ton. And it sucked. There's many times where I felt discouraged and like I was never going to get back to where I was. But I always found a way to do what I could while I could. And I think, keeping my routine as much as I could, even if I could only go for a walk, I was going to focus on that. Even if I only could focus on my nutrition, I was going to focus on that. So there's little ways that you can kind of keep yourself moving forward, or even, preventing yourself from taking huge steps back, just by focusing on the little things and breaking things down and focusing on, just taking it one day at a time and focusing on the things that you can, celebrating small wins. For example, after I had phalloplasty, my arm was all messed up. And I remember, going to physical therapy, and I couldn't even move my wrist, and even holding a plastic ball and basically doing a bicep curl, holding the plastic ball was extremely hard for me to do. And I just remember being wow, this is how am I going to get back to where I was? This is really depressing. And you kind of just can't let yourself get caught up in those feelings of, I used to be able to do this, because that's going to get in your head. So what you want to consider is just try to be present as much as possible. Yeah, maybe you can curl 100 pounds and now you can't even curl a plastic ball filled with air, but that's what you're given that day. Stay in the present and then just focus on moving forward. Don't focus on the past. Focus on where you're at and what you need to do to keep moving forward. So anyways, that would be a mindset shift, right? So things to ponder. How can this setback benefit you in the future? And that's just a question. For me, basically it benefited me in that I had a lot of surgeries in the future that I had to bounce back from. But also it made me so much more grateful, and it makes me more grateful for where I'm at now, because I didn't quit and I did just focus on what I could do and kept doing whatever I could do. And now I'm looking back I'm so glad I didn't just get fixated on the past and quit completely. And who knows where I'd be. So try to think of where that setback can benefit you. They're always usually a learning lesson. There's something to learn from it. And then also another question is, how might this make you stronger in the long run? And like I said, for me personally, it just made me a lot more grateful for where I'm at. And I think it just makes you more resilient because you're less likely to quit over something, small, a little wrench in your plans, because you're like, man, I took like a whole last 12 weeks off almost from the gym involuntarily. I got this. I missed a workout today. It's okay. I know it's going to be fine. And then you just kind of keep moving forward. So there's always ways to learn from your setback. They're never fun. And in the moment, you probably won't want to get any sort of learning lesson or positive thing. You won't want to think about how it could be positive. But I challenge you to try, at least. All right? So the biggest thing also, I already kind of talked about this, is learning to pivot and not quit. So the key through getting through setbacks is accepting that, life is going to throw hurdles at you, and then learning to pivot and not quit. So maybe you might need to adjust your workouts. Maybe you can only walk and you need to focus on walking. Maybe you can't even exercise and you're basically bedridden. So how can you improve your nutrition? So there's always something that you can focus on. And even if it's not nutrition that you can focus on, how can you work on your mindset? How can you work on your mental health? Can you journal? Maybe you hate meditation, but you have no choice but to sit still? So hey, perfect time to practice sitting still. So another thing when it comes to maybe a more planned setback with surgery, one of the best things you can do for yourself is making sure you put in place a support network. Make sure that you have friends you can talk to, or friends that can come by and, take you out for a drive, take you out somewhere just to kind of get out of your environment and have some laughs, take your mind off of things for a second. Or, therapy, having a therapist that you can talk to if, you start getting depressed, or even if you're not starting to get depressed, just having a therapist there to support you, have someone that you can talk to without feeling like, you're talking too much about yourself or you're being Debbie Downer or whatever, therapists are a great thing to have when you're preparing for surgery because, people don't really think about that, post-op depression. It's one of those things that you think you can escape but it always tends to show its ugly head. Your body is going through a lot. It's pretty traumatic for your body. Like you just got cut into. It's traumatic. And you were under anesthesia. There's a lot of drugs that were pumped into your body. There's a lot of drugs that you're coming off of that were pumped into your body. So there's a lot of things chemically that are going on that we don't really have control over. And sometimes that can cause some mental shifts. So basically, in the way that you'd plan for a setback in your fitness journey, plan for a setback in your recovery with post-op depression. Just make sure you have things in place to support you through that. It doesn't have to be like an extended period of depression, as long as you have things in place to help you out of it, right? So don't fall into that post-op depression hole. It's okay to like dip your toe in. We all do it, but don't just jump right in, all right? So another big thing to remember when it comes to setbacks is that you have to remember it's temporary. So setbacks do not have to be permanent unless you allow them to be. And the only way you can allow them to be is if you quit. So at some point, you just have to trust that as long as you keep showing up and doing the little things, little steps, everything counts. As long as you keep doing that, keep your commitment to yourself, you're going to gain back your strength. You're going to get back to where you were, and more so. If I think about 7 years ago when I had phalloplasty, I never, imagined that I would come back stronger eventually. It's been 7 years, but if I would have quit, I don't know where I'd be. So I'm just glad I didn't. So you just have to remember, it is temporary. And as cliche as it sounds, it does get better. I always feel like when people say it gets better, I'm like, I don't fucking care. What about right now? But it does get better. And it's hard to keep in mind that sometimes, but it's temporary. All right. So to wrap up all of that, and you've got practical tips to take away. This podcast is going great. So one, whether it's a mental or physical setback, don't be afraid to ask for help. Seriously, do not. And having a support system, a therapist, that's key, okay? Don't skip that part. 2, try to stay positive. It's not easy. And staying positive doesn't mean just being like ignorantly blissful about everything. It just means that you can also recognize the hard parts, but then also recognize that it's temporary and it's not forever. And just having that confidence in yourself that you're going to get through it. And if you're not confident in yourself that you can get through it, that's where you have your support system to tell you that, right? Your therapist, your friends, etc. So biggest tip, if you can anticipate the setback, like the surgery, put a plan in place. The support network, things to keep you busy, things to focus on. It's going to make it a lot easier than just going in without any expectations or plan. And if it is like a mental setback or something you didn't anticipate, just try to take it one day at a time. That's all you can really do. Try not to go into the past and just focus on one foot in front of the other. All right. So that's all for this episode. Let's keep it a little short and sweet. I don't actually know how long this has been going because I ordered some groceries and they knocked on the door and it set off my dog alarm. So I had to pause it. You might have heard that. I apologize. But anyways, so setbacks are temporary. Don't throw away everything just because you're feeling like things are never going to be the same, because they will. All right? Cool. If you would like to tell me about one of your setbacks and you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave it in the comments. Or if you have any topic suggestions or questions, you can also leave that in the comments. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, feel free to leave a review if you feel so inclined or you have the time. That would help me out a ton. So, all right, guys, thanks so much for listening. Peace out. I'll talk to you next time.